Hey guys, Mars Thinking here, bringing you another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video. And so yesterday I did the red zone guide for global for the GT bosses, basically going through all the stats of the bosses and all the information about their abilities and stuff like that. So obviously the follow-up to that is to do one for the movie bosses stages as well. So don't need to really do a huge amount of an intro if you caught the previous video. Obviously there are 7 stages. Turlas, Lord Slug, Cooler, Fusion Android 13, Bojack, Janemba, and then Broly. Just like the GT one and like the God event from the previous anniversary, these unlock over the course of the anniversary. Only the first 2 stages, I believe, are available right at the start. So these will unlock as the celebration goes on. And just like the GT one, you can only try it 3 times a day. I love the use of the word thrice, but yeah, 3 times a day. You can only bring 1 support item. You get the 2 copies of it, but only 1 type of item. And obviously you can bring a support memory, and you cannot continue with stones. Basically the same old stuff from any like difficult content, right? And then the missions to complete all of the events. You get 5 stones for each stage, as well as 7 tickets for the movie edition Red Zone banner. I showed that off in the video that I did the other day, talking about all the different tickets from the celebration. So if you haven't seen that, go ahead and check it out. And then, of course, getting all of these gets you the movie Kakarot support memory from the end of the Broly movie. And this gives you movie heroes, allies, attack and defense 10% for the entire battle. When there's an ally whose name includes Goku in the team, all allies key +1 for 7 turns from the start of the battle. So exactly the same as the GT one, except it's movie heroes instead of GT heroes. Just like movie heroes, there's probably no way you're running, or sorry, just like the GT heroes one, there's probably no way you're running a team who doesn't have a character whose name includes Goku. Because obviously remember, these incorporate the Year 7 LRs. Not to mention all the various other units like the Resurrection of F Blues that are going to come out. Like, there's almost no way you're running a Movie Heroes team that doesn't have a Goku in it. So getting 1 key for the first 7 turns would be pretty nice as well. So, I'm going to go through all the abilities of all the bosses. I did mention the credit in the previous video. Make sure you check that one out anyway, right, to see the GT bosses info. But Luca Dokkan and a bunch of other people put all of this information together, and then he sent it to me. So shout out to them. And let's go ahead and jump straight in. Okay, so the first boss is going to be Turlas. And straight away you can see a big difference from the GT first stage, where you only fight 1 enemy with 1 big health bar and it's just 1 phase. The Turles one, you're immediately thrown in to having the first stage be against 5 enemies, the whole of Turles' crew, all at once, so kind of like a Super Battle Road stage. However, very much like Super Battle Road, the good thing here is that all of his minions are susceptible to all status effects. So they can be attack lowered, they can be stunned, they can be sealed. So just like a Super Battle Road stage. Obviously, if you take a bunch of supers turn 1, you are potentially going to take quite a lot of damage. But depending on how you've built your team, obviously you are going to be able to use those status effects to your advantage. There is 1 enemy of every typing, so this isn't a stage where you can just bring a team that's mostly made up of 1 typing that doesn't have to face up against type disadvantage, especially because the second phase is STR and the final phase is INT. So even though the final phase is INT, you obviously can't just stack up on physical units because the middle stage is STR. So the first stage, despite the fact that it's multiple enemies, shouldn't be too difficult. Then the second phase is against obviously the LR Turles form. He can't be stunned or sealed, but he can be attack lowered. So obviously that is going to be beneficial once again. Almost 500k damage from his super attack. So even when you get to this second phase, if your units are, you know, anything below like 200k defense, you're still going to be taking pretty big damage from these super attacks. So you do have to be careful of that. And he attacks 9 times per turn. Then the third and final stage is INT. He can't be stunned or sealed, as well as not being able to be attack lowered or defense lowered. And he can stun with his super attack. So he does quite a bit of damage, 650k. He has a 16% chance to super attack in each turn, and he does 8 attacks. Obviously, the worst case scenario is that he supers in slot 1 and actually stuns your slot 1 unit. But other than that, shouldn't be too difficult. you know, these first, like I said in the GT bosses one, I was able to beat the first couple of stages even with like a 170 team. My JP account is not particularly stacked, units aren't like fully link leveled and stuff like that. So even though he's going to give you a little bit of a tough time maybe at the end, depending on your team build, shouldn't be too difficult to do Turlas. So stage 2, moving on, is Lord Slug. So in a similar vein, in fact most of the movie bosses ones are like this. You have to fight his minions in the first phase. So AGL, int and physical. Again, like Turlas' minions, they are susceptible to all status effects. So you can attack lower, stun, seal, all that good stuff. AGL, int and physical. The second phase is physical, and then the final giant Lord Slug is STR. So there's actually no tech enemies, so obviously you can bring a decent amount of AGL units to help you blast through the giant form slug at the end, and then that should work out quite nicely. So when you get onto the second phase against the normal Lord Slug, he can't be stunned or sealed or attack lowered, so he can be defense lowered. He does have an ability to regen HP. When his HP is 85% or less, or 85.1%, he can use an ability to recover 13% HP, which the wiki lists as being just under 2 million. So quite a lot of healing, but obviously your big hitters are going to be able to counteract that a little bit. It just keeps him hanging in there just a little bit longer. And then when you get to the STR Lord Slug, his abilities are basically the same. No stun, seal, or attack lower, but he can be defense lowered, and he can heal as well. Basically has the same restrictions. However, he heals a slightly higher percentage, 14%, and the wiki lists that as being around 2.5 million that he will heal when he does that. So he can be defense lowered, which obviously we know isn't the most crazy status effect in the game, but will allow you to do a little bit of extra damage, as well as the fact that obviously some units do get some extra procs if units have defense down as one of the negative status effects. So Lord Slug shouldn't be too difficult, but there you go, that is stage 2. Stage 3 is Cooler. So once again, we have the minions for stage 1, physical, tech, and AGL. So again, you got the medium phase, or the medium phase. The middle phase is STR, the last phase is physical. So if you load up on STR units to try and combat the final stage, you've obviously got to be very careful of, is it Nays? I forget the names of some of these guys sometimes, or get them confused as to which one's which. But one of the minions is AGL. However, again, just like the other minion phases, these guys can be stunned, sealed, and attack lowered. They do all have a 7% chance to dodge as well, so that is something you have to keep an eye out for. But if you are bringing a few extra STR units to combat the final phase, you just want to make sure you go for seals or stuns on the AGL one, so that you don't eat a stray super attack and take a lot of damage. Because you can see here, we're getting into even only the 3rd stage, and these guys are hitting for over 350k. Even with an STR unit with decent defense, when you factor in the fact that you're having type disadvantage, if they eat a super, he's going to do quite a lot of damage. So then we move on to the 4th form Cooler, or what is essentially what's Frieza's final form. He's obviously the STR one in terms of the art. So he can't be stunned, can't be sealed, can't be attack or defense lowered, and he has a 7% chance to dodge. Other than that, he doesn't really have any other crazy mechanics. He's STR. He can hit you pretty damn hard, 600k, over 600k damage. Has over 22.5 million HP. I was going to say over 22 million, which is true, but 22.5 million, 9 attacks, 14% chance one of them is going to be a super, 7% dodge. Just pretty straightforward, nothing too crazy or over the top that he does. He just obviously is... We're getting to that point now where they're starting to hit you kind of hard. And then the final boss is the final form Cooler. Again, no stun, seal, attack or defense lower. Has 7% chance to dodge. And then he has a countdown to do his super attack. As you can see, his super attack damage is not far off of 1 million damage. So again, you've got to be very careful. He does the 3, 2, 1 countdown and then does the super attack. So ideally you want to put your best units with damage reduction or dodge chance or absorption or nullification for super attacks. And then well, actually I think if this Cooler, depending which super attack animation he has, he potentially isn't a Key Blast super. So I don't know if there are any units that can nullify his super attack. Let me double check real quick. Yeah, according to this, the art that the card that it's using is the SSR of the Tech Cooler, and his super attack is the Supernova, which is a Ki Blast super attack. So then, in theory, that will be able to be nullified by units that can nullify Ki Blast super attacks. So, moving on to the next stage, we have the Fusion Android 13. Now, for this stage, you do fight the minions again in stage 1. However, now you are unable to seal, attack lower. Oh no, you can attack lower, sorry. They attack lower you, as well as defense lowering you. So their super attack will lower your attack and defense. However, they can be stunned, they can be attack lowered. So they can't be sealed, but you can hit them with a stun. You've got Extreme Physical and Extreme STR. And then the next two phases for the Android 13 himself are Physical. So since there's no AGL, since there's no int involved here, you can obviously bring more tech units to deal with Android 13 once you get to his phase. So the untransformed Android 13 can't be stunned, sealed, or attack lowered. And then he disables dodge. So be very aware going into this event. Both stages of 13, pre-transformation and then post-fusion, cancel dodge. So you can't bring in units here that completely rely on dodge for their defense. You know, units who are still good without having to dodge are obviously still going to be okay. But units like AGL UI Goku, for example, who needs his dodge to be good. Because ideally, even if he's going to take a hit, you want him to get that first dodge so he gets the little defensive buff. No one can dodge in this event. You can dodge against the 14 and 15, but you can't dodge against Android 13. So be very careful about that. Again, tech unit's going to be very, very beneficial here. He has no extra special abilities other than that. And he can be defense lowered, which again, whilst not super crazy, can be useful for some units. Obviously, his super attack, 900k damage. So be very careful. Again, tech units with good defense, they're not going to take that much, obviously. But Android 13 is going to be able to hit you rather hard. So then we move on to the Bojack phase. So I know this is one that people do find very irritating. So Bojack has his minions as the first stage. 4 of them, STR, Tech, Physical, and Int. And they are immune to being stunned. So you can seal them, you can attack lower them, but you are unable to stun them. They all hit pretty hard as well. Look at this. They're all doing 500,000 before we factor in defense and damage reduction guard and all that kind of stuff. So you definitely got to be very careful. You can get very unlucky loading into this event and just have like 2 or 3 of them super attack you in the first turn. And then obviously you're off to a not particularly ideal start, shall we say. Then the second phase is against just straight up Bojack. Can't be stunned, can't be sealed, can't be attack or defense lowered. He randomly changes key spheres, which obviously can be annoying if you're trying to set up future turns. And he also can dodge your attacks with a 5% dodge chance. So not super annoying. The orb thing can be irritating, but not super annoying. 850k on the super is not the worst. Lower than some of the other bosses, although obviously this isn't the final stage. 30 million HP, so he can soak up quite a bit of damage. And then the final phase, which is the LR Bojack, although extreme tech, can't be stunned, sealed, attack, or defense lowered. Still randomly changes key spheres, but then he can lock a unit in place. He can seal one of your units at the start of the turn, and he still has a 5% dodge chance. So the reason why this phase can be so annoying is, even if you've built your team as best you can go into this last phase, and then he can seal a unit that needs to super to get their defense, and lock them in slot 1 all at the same time. Which means that at that point, unless you're popping like a Whis, like, you know, you've saved your item for this final stage, which obviously you should do, you are going to be in serious trouble if that happens. So rotation locking is my least favorite mechanic in the game that bosses do. I've said this many times before, because it, you know, there's not a lot of things you can do to get out of it, right? You have to use an item to protect yourself, because in the red zone you're not going to be bringing a Senzu bean as your item, right, to break the rotation locking. So you're just going to have to turtle up with a defensive item, unless you get lucky and one of your defensive units is just in slot 1, right? Because imagine you bring a unit like Tech Ultimate Gohan, for example. You get to the final phase, he's had a bunch of stacks, so he's got like 500k defense. Then he gets locked in slot 1 and sealed. you know, he's got 500k defense and guard. So he is still going to take some damage, but it's not going to be the end of the world. So unfortunately, that does come down to RNG. There will be people out there where you will go into this final phase and he will lock and seal exactly who you don't want him to, and you're basically GG at that point. So very unfortunate, but it is what it is. Last phase can hit almost 1 million, has 34 million HP, so can be very, very irritating to fight this guy. So second to last stage is Janemba. Things get a little bit more simple with him. You fight Fat Janemba at stage 1, can't be sealed, stunned, attack or defense lowered. Other than that, he doesn't have any special abilities. Does hit reasonably hard considering this is only like phase 1 and it's almost 650k, but it is what it is. He doesn't have any other crazy special abilities, so it's not too bad. Then you move on to Extreme Int on the second phase. Can't be stun, sealed, attack or defense lowered. He also randomly changes key spheres. He has a 10% dodge chance, and then he also has a rage meter, which once you hit, according to these details on the actual data on screen, it's after you hit him with 6 super attacks, he will then enter the rage mode. So it's not actually a third phase per se. You can, I guess technically you can just defeat him beforehand if you somehow didn't hit enough supers, but I mean, you're not going to be dealing enough damage, right, if you're not hitting those super attacks. So if you hit him with the supers, he switches into his rage mode, which is physical. When he switches into the rage mode, he still has all of the same effects as before, including the randomly changing key spheres and the 10% chance to dodge. The only difference, of course, is he hits a lot harder. He has a slightly lower chance that he's going to super attack in the turn, but he does 1 extra attack, and his attacks are hitting harder, both normal and super attacks. So obviously you have to be very careful. Other than that, he doesn't have any mechanics in the sense of like locking, sealing, that kind of thing. So you do still have your choice of the rotation. The orbs getting changed can mess you up a little bit, of course, but other than that, shouldn't be too bad. There's no AGL phase, so obviously you can load up on STR units for the final phase, as long as they are obviously good defensively, right? Because you're going to be type neutral against the first phase of Super Janemba, but you can hit him with some of them big supers. Then he's going to rage mode into the physical Janemba, and then you can just come in with those STR units and do a nice little bit of damage to him. So this guy doesn't really have any irritating effects. Like, definitely, I feel like this guy is actually not as challenging as Bojack, just because he doesn't have those annoying abilities that can just completely screw you over. But he definitely can hit you very hard, and he has 50 million HP, so he definitely takes a beating before he goes down. And then last but most certainly not least, I don't know why this graphic is a lot smaller than all the other ones, but we have Broly. So Truth is on record as saying that Broly is not only the hardest, but also the most unfair fight in Dokkan. And I mean, I'm inclined to agree from some of the stuff that I've seen. I mean, runs very much can be lost almost beyond your control against this guy. So phase 1, he is STR. He's already hitting you for over 500,000 before we calculate in defense and stuff, which is pretty crazy, as well as attacking 8 times. He only has 18 million HP, which I guess it doesn't sound like that much compared to some of the other bosses, but it would still take you, unless you're bringing like a hyper powerful, you know, 7-year with all the LRs, very unlikely you're going to be one-turning this phase, right? So STR Broly, nothing too fancy for him. He can't be defense lowered, which means he can be attack lowered, sealed and stunned. And then he does disable dodge. So remember, this is the first part that makes this also difficult, is dodge is disabled for the entire event. So it's not like Android 13 where it's only disabled against him. It is disabled for the entire event. So units who rely on dodging, you cannot bring into the Broly fight. And because like I'm saying, if they rely on dodging, if they dodge as like a big part of their kit, but they can also be very good defensively otherwise, that's fine. Although there's not many units like that, to be honest. So you got to be very careful. You cannot bring in units that need to dodge in order for them to be good. So, and then that also causes issues which will come into play later when we talk about the later stage abilities. So once you beat the first phase, you go into the Wrathful Broly, who is Extreme Tech. Now, he can't be stunned, sealed, attack, or defense lowered, and then obviously dodge is still disabled. He can hit you pretty hard, 728k. He has 20 million HP, attacks 9 times, but other than that, again, nothing too crazy outside of the dodge disabling. So the first 2 phases, you might think to yourself, well, that's not too bad. And then we get on to the Extreme STR Super Saiyan Broly phase. So he has a AoE super attack, which does 840k damage. So that means every single unit on the rotation is going to take 840k damage before factoring in defense and super and like guard and damage reduction, all that kind of stuff. Which means if you're running a rotation of units that even at the start of the turn have like 400k defense but no guard or damage reduction or anything like that, obviously they can't dodge. Each one of those units, unless they have type advantage, is going to take around 400k damage, which means you are going to die, because there are no teams in the game that have, what, 12 million HP. So yeah, not good. Or sorry, 1.2 million, I should say. 1.2 million HP you would need. So a lot of the strategy I see when going up against STR Broly, and Truth does this a lot in videos where he's trying to showcase like a random unit, but he wants to get to the final phase against the AGL Broly, is you just double Whis, and that gives you 2 turns where you won't take that much damage. But even then, units that are like low on defense at the start of the turn, especially if they need to super first to get their defense, say they're on like 100k defense, which is bad, right? But let's say 200k, because they need to super to get the rest of their defense, right? You put them in slot 3, you know, they're going to super get their defense, they're going to be fine. But before they super, they only have 200k. When he AoEs, he's doing 600k damage to them if he AoEs in like slot 1. So defensive items very much saved for this guy. Any no item runs I've seen against this Broly are all using teams of units that are full of units that all stack or guard or have damage reduction, because it's kind of the only way you're going to be able to survive his AoE super without having an item active, is just having ridiculously high defense with some kind of defensive utility like guarding or damage reduction. So yeah, he attacks a bunch of times. He has a 14% chance to super. Now, obviously, he could not super and AoE everybody, which would be nice. But unfortunately, that is not the case. And yeah, he's going to be doing a lot of damage with that AoE. So be very, very careful. And then the final stage, AGL Broly, 50 million HP. 1.2 million on his super attack, and you can read down below he has a 20% chance that one of the attacks is going to convert into a super when they're all calculated at the start of the turn, right? But he can super attack twice per turn. So if you get really unlucky, I don't know if I've ever seen this on video, but technically in theory, worst case scenario RNG, like literally you are the king of bad RNG, he could super attack you twice in slot 1. So unless you are using an absolute beast god slot 1 tank, you're probably dead unless you've got a Whis up or something. So yeah, this Broly is no joke. Obviously, again, he can't be stunned, sealed, attack or defense lowered. He can super attack twice. You obviously can't dodge, which is what makes this so hard, right? With the STR AoE Broly, units who haven't supered first to get their defense, they don't have that backup of being able to maybe dodge. And then in the AGL, 2 super attacks potentially in a turn, each of which do over 1 million damage before we factor in the defensive capabilities of our units. So Broly is an absolute monster. Yeah, just absolutely crazy. Like, I look forward to taking him on myself. I want to try it out with a bunch of different teams. You guys let me know what you think down below. From what you've seen on JP and all that, what team are you planning to take against him? But it is very, very difficult. Like, the top tier teams in the game, like all the 200% leaders, it is perfectly possible to be able to beat this guy. But at the same time, if you make a mistake or you get bad RNG or you take a risk and don't use an item on a specific turn or whatever, you can quite easily still lose, even with the top tier teams. This is by far the hardest fight in the entire game. So, you know, I'm sure there will be some people that are not going to be able to get this done, even by the end of the anniversary, and we'll have to wait for some future buffs to some of their teams. But yeah, Broly is by far the hardest event in the entire game. So, like I said, let me know down below what you guys think. What teams are you going to run against these guys? I am going to be streaming a lot of my red zone attempts, and probably to just have a bit of fun, I'm going to leave a lot of it up to you guys in the stream chat to decide what teams we use when we take on these stages, which will then make it into videos for the channel to go up later. So hopefully I'll see you guys there. Let me know, like I say, down below in the comments, what teams are you planning to take on these events with, and let me know all your thoughts about the red zone down below in the comment section. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below for the Discord and the merch store, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.